Welcome to another edition of Around the Table with Stacy Smith as we take a look at the economy and investing. In about a week, the Federal Reserve will hold its next policy meeting, and once again, it is expected to raise interest rates. But the only question is, by how much? There's been a lot happening in the economy, and that has given some hope that the Fed may begin to impose lower rate hikes. That hope has also led to all the major indices showing gains for the year, but they are still down significantly from their all-time highs. What is happening in the economy and how it could have an impact on what you have invested is part of our discussion in this week's Around the Table. As I go around the table, I'm happy to welcome back once again all of our guests, and they include Carrie Coghill. Carrie is the president and CEO of Coghill Investment Strategies, which is headquartered here in Pittsburgh. She is recognized as one of the nation's leading voices on financial advising. Also with a seat at the table is Frank Rossetti. Frank has been advising clients for 50 years, and Frank helped to establish Harvest Financial, where he is the executive chairman. Across the table, we find Kim Forrest. Kim is the chief investment officer and the founder of Boca Capital Partners. Kim has a dual background in both finance and in software engineering, and you may have seen Kim in her many appearances on CNBC, Fox Business, and also on Bloomberg. And as we go around the table, we find a man whose name is familiar to a lot of Pittsburghers, and that is Bob Fergasso. Bob has been in the investment and advisory business for 50 years and is chairman and chief executive officer of Fergasso Financial Advisors. Once again, welcome all of you back to Around the Table with Stacy Smith, and let's go ahead and get into what we're talking about here. Now, part of the reasons the markets have moved higher this year so far is that the economy is beginning to react to the higher interest rates. At least it seems that way. The Fed made no secret that its money tightening policy is going to cause pain to Americans, especially in the area of layoffs. So far, that is evident in the more than 100,000 people who have lost their jobs in the high-tech industry. But at the same time, just about everywhere you go, you also see some help wanted signs. So, Carrie, my first question comes to you. What is happening? Are these layoffs eventually going to catch up with the rest of the economy?
Well, it's interesting because the tech sector is one of the largest sectors in the economy, and it impacts just about every other sector. So I do think that we're going to see impact. However, I think that impact is going to be seen basically by a slowdown in hiring versus layoffs. As you mentioned, there are still a lot of help wanted signs out there. This economy is still healing from the pandemic, when we had so much disruption, a lot of structural disruption in employment, and a lot of companies, number one, are still trying to get employees to come back to the office, number one, but also they're still trying to replace workers that they may have laid off during the pandemic, or just in terms of their business. And I think for a lot of employers, being one myself, it's hard to not be able to find good people. So I know I'm a lot more reluctant going forward to find myself short-staffed. And I think a lot of other businesses are feeling that way. So there still is a drive in many sectors to want to add people, but the fallout from higher interest rates and layoffs in the tech sector, there will be fallout. And I think that's first and foremost going to come with a slowdown of hiring. And we're seeing that incrementally, but the job creation is still very strong.
Something that you may not know about the tech industry is this, that the people who are at companies that make the product or are the product themselves, as if they're consultants that go out and do things, at a tech company, those are some of the highest paid people. And although they have skills that a company that doesn't create technology can use, they're going to get paid slightly less than in the role in which they are the product, right? That makes sense. You're the product, you get paid more. You are overhead, you're going to get paid less, even though it's still a very rich kind of pay. So I think what we're going to be able to see from all these tech layoffs is in the jobs report, which economists and investors look at very closely, we're going to see falling wages. And some of this is because the people who are laid off are among the most highly compensated in our economy. So that can give the Fed some room, maybe, in their slowdown of their increase of their rate increases. So this could be a benefit, oddly enough. And it looks like the tech people are being quickly absorbed into other jobs.
Stacy, I think there's an issue regarding your comment about the large number of layoffs. Those have been within the large tech companies, and less about laying off people and cutting payroll, and more about cutting initiatives that are eating capital that aren't working out as well or as quickly. So it's more about shedding, autonomous cars. We're not going to do it anymore, as an example. That's more about that. And then the people associated with that initiative are laid off, rather than let's lop off. Some companies have said, there's a major bank that said we're cutting 4% of the workforce, but that's in the minority. It's more about cutting the capital intensive initiatives.
When you consider 100,000 people in the industry being laid off, I don't want to sound unsympathetic to their plight, but most of the people in the tech business are part of the people that are a large number of the people that are in demand on the 10 million jobs that are available to be taken. The 6 million unemployed people that exist are probably not high tech type people. They're probably lower tech type people where those jobs are less available and the higher tech jobs. So I think those 100,000 jobs, people that have been laid off will have jobs rather quickly, because it's really not that many people in the whole scope of things at this point.
Well, if that's the case, and I think all of you kind of are in agreement maybe with this, how does this then affect the Fed policy? Because it is basically said it's going to cause pain. We're going to see layoffs, but if people are being laid off and they're being rehired again, is this counter to what the Fed wants?
No, it is what the Fed wants. When capital was cheap, next to nothing, then limping initiatives could be continued. The Fed jacked up the cost of capital, and it made companies sharpen their pencils and say, no, we don't want to pay that carrying cost. So it has had the effect that the Fed wanted.
We've had a local example of that, Bob, in Argo AI. Argo AI was funded by largely by Ford and Volkswagen. And now that money costs more, the billions we're putting into that, they've pulled that away, and they've actually taken the employees into their own shops, and they're going to continue that initiative, except not fund Argo AI anymore. So Argo AI is going out of business, and their staff employees have to find new jobs, whereas their tech people are probably working for Volkswagen and Ford, continuing the initiative that they were doing anyway.
I think you bring up a really good point, Stacy, in terms of, if these tech people are getting rehired quickly and it's not really moving the needle of where the Fed wants to see unemployment, the question is really going to become, what's the behavior of the consumer? And, we had a very disappointing retail sales number out this month. I think the Fed's going to really need to balance out the data that they're looking at to see what the impact is going to be on the economy. We have seen consumers work through their savings. We are experiencing much higher levels of credit card debt. So, the question is, even if they're getting rehired, and to Bob's point, or they may not be making as much as they were, is that going to slow the economy? And is the Fed, does the Fed really need to weight other factors as heavily as they're weighting jobs?
Okay, we have to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.